Look, we're live.
Hello. You think should we put on the
And good morning.
tin toys?
Well, yes, I think we should because it has just struck 9, and this is the time that
Right.
people are, tuning in. Say, tuning in. Is that what we still say?
Might as well.
Am I just old?
But we still say stuff like videotape. Nobody uses videotape.
How did they not collide?
One's higher than the other.
Ever so slightly, eh?
It looks not very visible. I think the Drinky Bird's pretty visible.
Tricky Bird just
But Drinky Bird could
did
fly.
something untoward to me. I think.
Drippy Bird.
Chirpy. And good morning to all. In just say another minute, we shall start. We shall get going. Oh, that's not bad. I don't think I can do what I want to do. All right, it's winding down, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Should we take that as a sign?
All right. Come here, Drinky Bird. I thought I was going to get some more, but I haven't yet. All right, this is now Bridge to a Better World. I'm Teresa. That's Ani, and we're here to talk about the topics of the day from our anarcho-feminist, queer positive perspective. And I want to start by passing on this article from South China Morning Post. And I look at South China Morning Post to find its articles on China and on the region. But I also like to look at it just because it's a different perspective on U.S. topics. And they had an article about Joe Biden's oil reserve release, as you probably have heard, since Putin's being boycotted, since Russia's being boycotted, there is less oil available, and that is being blamed for gas prices going up. And without getting into that too much, that's capitalist blather, but they wrote, U.S. President Joe Biden on Thursday launched the largest release ever from the country's emergency oil reserve and challenged oil companies to drill more in an attempt to bring down fuel prices that have soared during Russia's war with Ukraine. Starting in May, the United States will release 1 million barrels per day of crude oil for 6 months from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, he said. And I want to stop at that point because I got a couple of thoughts about that. One probably that you've had is like, okay, so we're at a point in history in which there is less fuel available, less carbon fuel available. So it seems to me that it's obviously time to undertake emergency measures and put out more solar panels and wind generation. And there's nothing of this because the same big oil that funds the Republicans funds the Democrats. And Joe isn't going to very easily get reelected if he pisses off big oil.
Really? Are you
Yes.
implying
Yeah.
that corporate power could hold sway over democracy?
Yeah, call me a cynic. So that's not being discussed. I guess we're a million barrels per day is 180 million barrels if he does it for 6 months. He's quoted saying, "This is a moment of consequence and peril for the world and pain at the pump for American families." And once again, it's pain at the pump for the American families. He never said it's pain at the pump for the profits of the big oil companies. They'll just have to take the hit, he said. Never. Anyway, so he said that at an event at the White House, and he said it's a moment of patriotism. Meanwhile, the Republicans are going around putting stickers on the oil pumps across the United States saying, I did this, with a picture of Biden, because they know that Americans are so fucking stupid that that'll work. I mean, they're right. We are dumb, and it'll work. And
Oh, that's good. Isn't it?
I know. I mean, so he asked oil company executives, this is from NPR, to serve their customer. No, it isn't. I just said it was from South China Morning Post. And American families instead of the investors they have rewarded with billions of dollars in dividends, end quote. And it's an absurd idea. In the first place, the oil corporations that are determinedly destroying the entire planet's ecosystem, that have taken special measures to, brainwash you into blaming yourself for, not bicycling today. They aren't going to take Joe Biden's side or the American people's side versus their own investors. If they can sucker us into paying more at the pump, they will, and that will go straight to executive salaries and stock compensation, of course. When they pay less for oil, and they will with the U.S. subsidy, with the oil that you bought with your tax money, that will go straight to their profits. They're not on your side. They're on the side of billionaire oligarchs. They are billionaire oligarchs. They always will be. So the only way to get reasonable policy out of the big oil is to be reasonable about it and to seize their profits, seize their assets, seize their cash holdings, and put an end to big oil. But man, that is seditionist talk by the lights of most Americans. So somebody has to say it. You got any comments about that? Because I'm ready to.
Well, no, it's just, we can use this moment to actually pivot in how we deal with climate emergencies, how we deal with the fossil fuel industry, and actually, as you said, move towards a sustainable, renewable energy system. But no, that's not what we're going to do, is it?
I do believe in promoting. I do believe in promoting defiance. It's like in my experience over 30 years of doing radio, it kind of starts with defiance. First be defiant, and then people are like, why are you being defiant? Because it's kind of hard to get it around to the other way and say, for this reason, that reason, the other reason, they fall asleep, and you say you should be defiant. So I'm just going to be defiant first.
Well, yeah. Go ahead.
There you go. Well, okay, so I want to change topics, and I want to talk about Christo-fascism, because that's what Putin's about. You don't hear the term Christo-fascist bandied around much, but that is the term to apply to Vladimir Putin and his dictatorial regime. He invented his own variant of Christo-fascism over the last couple of decades by bringing in the Eastern Orthodox patriarchs as he set up his dictatorship. And once again, I want to say that we brought about Vladimir Putin. How? We paid through the National Endowment for Democracy, we paid for Boris Yeltsin's various scams, and we propped him up in his drunkenness. And the man who was getting things done for Boris Yeltsin all that time and all those years was Vladimir Putin. And so when Boris became too drunk to stand up, Vladimir took over, and now we've got him. So Vlad came up with Christo-fascism. And he did this by bringing in the Eastern Orthodox patriarchs, traditional Russian patriarchs, long-beard guys with the funny hats, as he set up his dictatorship. And it seems to be going pretty smoothly for him, as such things go. It is, in any event, allegedly popular, particularly away from the city centers. It comes with the slate of patriarchalist anti-GLBTQ repression, and is in most dynamics indistinguishable from the USA's anti-intellectual evangelical factions. So Putin is much approved by the Marjorie Green end of the MAGA crowd, and they have a hard time getting on board with the US war propaganda against him. And it's funny to watch, because they hate women's rights and GLBTQIA rights, but they have a knee-jerk response to militarism and obviously want to take a pro-war chauvinistic stance against Russia. I mean, the first thing they think is a war, they're for it. Oh, against Russia, that's confusing, but Russia is their model and their best buddy in terms of maintaining Trump as a dictator. That's who, Trump, famously called to, as the cameras rolled, to save his candidacy and then his dictatorship. So poor thing.
Well, he's begging them for help again now.
Yeah. I mean, he's learned he's not going to be called to account for anything. And
Hey, Putin, give me some dirt on Biden's kids.
I think that
Just because, we're in a war and all, shouldn't let.
I guess I don't know enough about Merrick Garland. I want to be careful about this because obviously, before the invasion, I didn't know enough about Putin. I've been trying to get up to speed on that. So I don't really know enough about Merrick Garland, but man, it don't look good. I hope that he does come down with a magnificently detailed set of indictments, but I'm not hopeful at this point. So all of that doesn't stop them from proceeding with the progress of fascism in the United States. Anti-abortion bills and anti-trans bills have been popping up in all the worst reactionary areas, not just Texas and the South, but also Iowa, Idaho, and Illinois. Fox News cheered them on yesterday, which was Transgender Day of Visibility. Hello. I wasn't very visible yesterday, but I am today. The headline on their website claimed that President Biden was encouraging surgery for transgender minors. It's like if he makes science and medicine available for people who need it, then he's encouraging.
Well, I mean, is he also encouraging, heart surgery or colon cancer screening? I mean, these are also medical procedures that are available in this country. He is the president. Does he encourage them?
I'm turning you in. And Fox generally
Just
tried
wondering.
to stir up the hatred as much as possible yesterday.
Where does he stand on root canals?
Yeah. While pretending to be a news site rather than a straight up hate node, Fox News is watched religiously by 7,200,000 people every single day in the United States. And quoting NPR, the administration once again condemns the proliferation of dangerous anti-transgender legislative attacks that have been introduced and passed in state legislatures around the country. These bills are government overreach at its worst. They are un-American and they must stop, according to the White House. And apparently this infuriated Fox's Laura Ingraham, who said, well, you can guess what she said. Oh, and just
What'd
before...
What'd she say?
I just...
Never mind.
Laura Ingraham
right.
stuff.
She Ingrammed?
Hateful stuff, yes. And
she Ingrammed all over the place.
Yep, bad mommy. And just before we went on air, I noticed that J.K. Rowling has, jumped up. And let's see, the latest thing she did is there's an investigation on a murder of a transgender woman in South Wales. And so she has taken to Twitter to sneer at it.
Because that's where we are.
Signing anti-transgender, on Turf Island. Signing anti-transgender legislation yesterday, Arizona Governor Doug Ducey, twice refused to say if transgender persons even exist. And he was pointedly asked and would not say. Texas is famously fighting courts to allow the state government to break up families where the parents are following settled medical guidance on the care of transgender children. Take away the kids, jail the parents. That's actually happening or trying to happen in Texas. And of course, I'm not mentioning the hatred that the evangelical right and the MAGA industrial complex promotes just to sneer at transgenderism. And if I haven't made the point yet, I'm transgender and I can feel and see the effects of this particular vanguard of fascism. And I mentioned the anti-abortion movement because it's all of a piece. The desire to control women, to force pregnant people to give birth, and to erase transgenderism as part of the fascist urge to institute the rule of the most brutal men, to create a new Reich in which the progress of humanism and science can be forgotten. In this new old order, we are all to obey our corporate masters without question, because that's what respect for knowledge and science leads to. It leads to a population that has the ability to reason and question and stand up for its own rights. And if we are to continue our march towards a billionaire oligarch-controlled society, the whole attitude of analyzing and questioning and thinking needs to go away. So Fox News is here to see that erasure through.
So I don't know who at this point needs this irony pointed out, this irony, this hypocrisy that, the same folks that were all about my freedoms because, a little piece of cloth over your face that could save the lives of, thousands is just too much of a burden are the same folks that want to deny bodily autonomy when it comes to pregnancy or your gender, because freedoms don't extend to uteruses. It's just about this little piece of cloth on your face. It's not about your entire body. It's not about your core identity. And I just want to say, along with what Teresa just said, Kentucky. The Kentucky's Republican-controlled legislature has approved a bill banning abortion after 15 weeks. It is modeled after the Mississippi bill, and that's currently under review by the Supremes. So, so there's that. Democrat Governor Andy Beshear hasn't said whether he will sign the legislation, but Republicans say that they have enough votes to override any veto that Beshear puts out. Also, of course, as Teresa was mentioning, um, just Wednesday, Arizona's Republican Governor Doug Ducey signed a similar ban on abortions after 15 weeks. So there's been over 200 anti-trans bills introduced this year. There's been a sweep of bills introduced to break Roe, the decision that the ruling that allows abortion to be a topic discussed between a person who is pregnant and their doctor and no one else. It's up for grabs now. So, yeah, I guess it's it's pretty dire is what it is. The one thing that is going kind of well, okay, the one piece of good news on the horizon when it comes to trans issues is that Biden's education department actually has said that they are working gender identity into Title IX. And so I'm just going to go ahead and cite a little of this story. The Post cites people familiar with the draft text of proposed Title IX regulations that expand the definition of discrimination on the basis of sex to include discrimination on the basis of sex stereotypes, sex related characteristics, including intersex traits, pregnancy or related conditions, sexual orientation, and gender identity. So that's happening. Dale Melker, who is the staff attorney at the Transgender Law Center, told Common Dreams, where I got the story, that the organization is heartened to hear that the Department of Education plans to issue regulations that correctly interpret Title IX's prohibition against discrimination on the basis of sex in education, which necessarily includes discrimination against trans people. So,
And actually, there was an even more recently breaking news, also from Britain. And the government, I'm not sure if it's Boris or the parliament or what, is actually moving against re-education camps for gay people, for gay and lesbian people. And they were going to be moving against re-education camps for gay, lesbian, and trans people. So guess why it's news. This is just a reflection of what happened in the United States in the 70s. The trans part has been removed, and so we will still be able to have British re-education camps for trans kids. Isn't that charming? One of the things I was thinking about while you're talking is, in a time in which fascism is on the ascendancy, we see more examples of Backpfeifengesicht, that German word that means a face that needs to be slapped, like Richard Spencer's mug just before he was just so gloriously punched by that person several years ago on the famous videotape, and nearly knocked down. I have to say, he can stand up pretty well after a blow like that. But what I'm talking about, so what I'm thinking about is that sneering bully mug. The one I'm talking about. Clarence Thomas's wife goes around with that sneering bully face, and J.K. Rowling has got that on her face in her photos that I saw today. Man, if I ever get that look on my face, please, y'all, just grab me by the hair and take me to the nearest psychiatrist, because if your face looks like that, then the thoughts in your head are wrong, and you need a good I don't know the German word for a slap, a good Anschlagen something.
I don't know, but you're talking about going to a therapy and not actually encouraging violence against anyone.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, well, so What else do you have?
That's it for me.
Oh,
Actually, this
goodness.
is a very short
Well,
little spiel from me.
one thing I just want to say about Title IX is that this actually it can be pretty significant because if schools want federal funding, they have to go along with this. This is it was groundbreaking in the 80s when I was in school. In making sure that girls had access to the same education that boys did. It was still really that simple. Um, and I find it very heartening in this moment when there's so much backlash against trans folks and intersex folks, and there is so much backlash against pregnant folks that Title IX is being codified to include protections for the trans and intersex communities. So
Ready for that?
I am really pretty excited about that. A few things that have caught my attention that Teresa maybe didn't mention. Amnesty International is concerned about abuses in El Salvador. If you haven't heard, um, El Salvador's president, Nayib Bukele, has a 30-day state of emergency that's temporarily suspended several constitutional protections. And basically, the country is under martial law. Amnesty issued an open letter to the president, who said this week that 3,000 people have been arrested since the start of this martial law. They've been accused of being in gangs. Salvadorans continue to denounce police abuse at the hands of the state, saying that Bukele is primarily interested in showing a high number of arrests, so it looks like he's actually doing something about the gang violence. Whether the gang violence decreases or not, state violence is not decreasing.
Yeah, and if there's anything to history, he'd have to arrest his own people to stop the gang violence.
Yeah, so there's that. Meanwhile, uh, so there's, I guess I'm still pretty disheartened over the fact that we are welcoming, and I'm not disheartened over the fact that we're welcoming Ukrainian refugees. We should be. We absolutely should be welcoming Ukrainian refugees. My problem stems from our treatment of all the non white refugees and uh, how we just this week have been deporting Haitians to a country that has very little infrastructure left after an earthquake, a major storm that is driven by climate change, and all of that after the assassination of their president. Um, it's unconscionable what we are doing, but we are doing it anyway. And so I just want to uh, say to all folks of conscience, we have to be talking about the racism that is so very transparent right now when it comes to our immigration policies, our immigration practices.
Really, it couldn't be more blatant, could it? I mean,
No, it really
I wonder
couldn't.
what people say about Americans, in Europe and Costa Rica and
It really
around the world.
couldn't. And so, yeah. I also want to I guess, congratulate the workers at Condé Nast. Condé Nast, the most recent high profile union formation. So the writers of magazines like Architectural Digest, Bon Appetit, Glamour, GQ, Vogue, Teen Vogue, Vanity Fair, and others.
I thought the Oregonian was Condé Nast. Am I wrong?
And I think you're wrong.
Okay, all right.
Knights Ritter? Am I wrong? I don't know. Well, look, but anyway,
We come here to
Condé,
speculate.
Condé Nast writers.
I'll now predict next week's weather.
Well, why would you ask me a question I have no answer to
Sorry.
in the middle of a live broadcast? For Christ's sakes. Yeah. Okay. Condé Nast writers have formed a union, and for that we congratulate y'all.
Yes, congratulate.
I'm excited. Actually, there's quite a lot of union activity going on right now.
There's an awakening, I think, and I would point to 2011 and Occupy Wall Street because, like I've said many times, I think that cracked open the door to class consciousness in a lot of people's minds. And um, as is often the case, there are people who were not old enough to be politically aware in 2011, 11 years ago, who are still affected by it because it just has that effect. People get to talking about things differently, and if you have ever felt down about the fact that Occupy Wall Street was utterly crushed, I think in retrospect we can see that there was scarcely any other fate for it, and yet I think it has had an effect. I think that
Well, it absolutely
people
has.
people are thinking differently. I'm certainly seeing a different attitude on social media about capitalism generally, and for young people, for people who are in their early 20s, and this is an amazing thing to me. It's okay for me to be a communist. Never thought I'd see it.
So, well, yeah, I think capitalism has proven its failure. And Occupy might have helped to crack open the zeitgeist, but I think the last 2 years really has underscored the evils, the shortcomings of capitalism in a way that is so transparent. Um, as we were talking just last week about the absolute willingness to sacrifice workers. That's Ozzy. Yeah, you just saw Ozzy's head. It's true. Ozzy's now attacking the drinky bird.
Yeah, he is aggressing on the drinky bird.
Yeah, you might help Drinky there. Where was I? Oh yes, the boss's willingness to sacrifice huge numbers of workers on the floors, be they retail workers, be they in grocery stores, be they uh, the workers in meat houses, in meat processing plants, which I believe was it Trump declared emergency workers and enforced that they had to be going to work because God knows it would be bad if somebody didn't get their burger that week. Um, it's it's just been so very transparent. The lack of care, the fact that workers are absolutely disposable, and I think that after after a while that wears thin. We notice, and so there is a large backlash against capitalism, and the union movement does seem to be growing. The also Teresa's pretty excited about the idea of a general strike coming up on May 1st.
There needs to be something because the great refusal isn't enough. I mean, right now, the only thing that the owning class is doing in regards to the great refusal is just being pissy about it and trying to continue to push low wage jobs. They're losing some ground. Obviously, I mean, we saw wages, higher wages being offered at, and maybe you've seen it also at fast food joints. That's encouraging because what's the worst job? Fast food has got to be down there. Some of the worst jobs, and Lord knows I've done enough of it myself as someone who undertook a fine arts degree program. You better believe I mopped a lot of floors.
Well, okay, so there is that. Um, well, I guess the only other thing I wanted to talk about then was, in fact, uh, the idea that I'll leave it.
Okay, well, what were you thinking of when you were doing your tarot
Well,
card today? What was the frame?
there's a couple of things. Um, yeah, okay. It is April 1st. It's the day of the Fool. So I want to wish everyone a happy April Fool's. And I wanted to talk just for a moment about the idea, Ozzy, about the idea of the Fool and what the Fool has been. So we have a history from the Middle Ages, really, in Europe of the court jester, of the Fool, of someone who was there to entertain the elite, But also in most of that history and most of the courts, the fool could get away with saying things to the ruling elite that no one else could. Sometimes the fool could bear bad news about losses to different colonies, about things that the rulers were not going to be wild about hearing. They could maybe slide that news in a little easier than other advisors. But also, they could poke at the rulers themselves. They punched up, I think, is what I'm trying to say. It was their job. And I just want to sort of liken that for a minute to comedians today. And we haven't had court jesters for maybe 300 years now, couple hundred at least. And we don't have a whole lot of kings going on either, but we do have comedians. And I just want to emphasize it is the role of comedians to punch up, not down. And any comedian that decides to punch at trans folks, immigrants, people of color, people with disabilities, you know, they're not really doing their job. They are, in fact, doing the job of the status quo. And the status quo don't really need that kind of reinforcement, so they can go fuck themselves, I think is what I'm saying.
I
Um,
have to share that sentiment.
so there, that's what I have to say
Well,
on this, the Day of the Fool.
Well, isn't it true
Happy
that
Jester's Day.
I think it was Barbara Walker points out in her women's history that April Fool's was actually the church trying to cover up the fact that it was some sort of bacchanal for the pagans around the 1st of April. Does that sound familiar? Well, I feel fairly certain about that, and so I'm saying crack open Barbara Walker's great work, women's history. What's the name of it? Women's history.
The Women's Encyclopedia of Myths and Secrets. I think you're talking about
Encyclopedia of Myths and Secrets.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's where I saw that.
All right, so there's that, and with that, let me get to this week's tarot guidance.
Ozzy's ready for you to get to it.
So, what we have going on here, we have the Queen of Pentacles. We have, the Queen of Cups. We have the Ace of Cups, and we have Judgment. And so, what I have to say about that, this is a time this week, really dig deep in your own emotional self. Get to know yourself. It is very important. Also, we may be needing a little nurturance. We may be needing um, a little be good to each other. I think that's what I'm trying to say. It is a time to be good to each other. It is a time to share in deep emotions, and it's a time to share in deep visions. The Queen of Cups is about a sort of a compassionate, nurturing mother figure, but also about somebody who is not afraid to explore the very depths of their own emotional world and to bring that knowledge back to help inform other decisions, other modes, to balance the sharpness of the mind, to always make sure that we are paying attention to our hearts, and the hearts have their own due. It's also a card that talks about bringing back your visions from the dream world, dreaming big, and bringing those dreams to bear in this world, in this time and space. The Ace of Cups talks about turning the page, a newness in that emotional world. We have been exploring the heart. Um, it's been a pretty emotive time. And it is perhaps there is a glimmer of turning over a new page, taking new opportunities to express ourselves and to share those emotions on a deep level. And judgment really calls for each and every one of us to be responsible for our actions. Um, how do you feel about your emotional self? What have you been doing with your emotions? Have you been hiding them? Have you been uh, um, keeping to yourself in a way that's not healthy? The judgment card sort of is a time to really take a long look at yourself. Um, and I would say, in a very compassionate way, uh, see where you're falling short of your own expectations and push yourself to do better. And again, this is by your own expectations because you you are your own boss. You are your own authority, and and the society really doesn't have a whole lot to tell you about what you should and shouldn't be doing. Us, my
Well,
dear,
he's got a more handsome face, you know.
he's lovely, but yeah. Anyway, so there's that. And with that, love each other, love yourself. Loving yourself is a radical act in this time where we are taught that you know that those of us who are queer, those of us who are outside of that mainstream of society, because we value holistic thinking, we value the earth, we value love, we value strength through compassion. um, it's important to love ourselves. It's important to love each other. It's important to share in our visions. And it's important to actually live up to our own expectations, to not fall into a sort of duplicitous trap where where we're a disappointment to ourselves. Doesn't do any good. So, with that,
Thanks for the comments, y'all.
carry on.
Adolf had the Vatican, Vlad has the Eastern Orthodox.
All right.
Ooh.
So, shall we go ahead and wrap it up?
Sign off. Okay. Well, you've been listening and watching. This is now Bridge to a Better World. That's Ani. I'm Teresa. And that was Ozzy. And we're so glad that you joined us. And we'll see you next week. Our love goes out to you and to all the ships at sea. Blink.